Hey guys, welcome back to Throw Tapping's FPL. It's Fran here and I'm back with a new video, which is going to be my Gameweek 16 team selection. I'm sporting the Spain kit here because I will be supporting the 26 selected for the World Cup, and I'm quite excited to see what we can do and build on from the Euros last time out. As far as Gameweek 15 though, it wasn't exactly the best week, I have to say. I made a huge error, I suppose, in going for a -4 with De Bruyne and Calvert-Lewin, and that meant I still have an issue to rectify with Calvert-Lewin. My thought process going for De Bruyne and Calvert-Lewin was actually that I thought Alvarez would be an issue for Game Week 16 because he might have to be a transfer out with Haaland coming back in. What I now have is two problems. I don't have Erling in my team, and Calvert-Lewin also has an injury. I will have to actually replace Calvert-Lewin this week, and I think that's probably the plan. Maybe without a hit towards Erling Haaland. I think I like the idea of having Salah and De Bruyne still. I think De Bruyne still operating at a fantastic level and hopefully can hedge a little bit against Haaland, although we know that's probably unlikely. I like the option of maybe going for someone like a Jesus this week as opposed to taking another -4. And I really think the Salah captaincy is still quite viable this week. It's one of those things where Salah's underlying stats have been great all season, but he's finally found the net a few times, and we now suddenly reconsider him as a captaincy option. At least I do myself. I have captained, of course, Salah a couple times this season. To my detriment, but I'm happy to do it again this week, specifically because I don't want to take a -4, and that's how things stand. De Bruyne still looks great, as I mentioned, and Saka Martinelli still had a good performance overall versus Chelsea. Good to see Saka coming back, and obviously, even in a tough game, I'd say, playing at Stamford Bridge, we still saw glimpses of a great Arsenal performance, having an XG of over 2.x. And that's something I'd like to see maybe investing into someone like a Gabby Jesus this week. As far as my defense, a little bit dismayed with Webster and the performances there. I do think this Brighton team obviously is a little bit more open previous to our expectations. We talked about that when De Zerbi was hired as a manager and how investing into the Brighton defense would go. But I still like the chances of Brighton getting a clean sheet this week, a little bit more so than going for a triple Newcastle defense. So Schär will have to be someone that I'd probably put on the bench once again. I did make a mistake, so to speak, when you look with hindsight, that Andres was the third player on my bench, but I don't really think I regret that move much. It's Man City. It's a game where I don't think that we expected him to get a penalty or even take the penalty, frankly. And now that that's changed, Mitrovic seems to have suffered a fresh injury. It's a good situation and a good time to look into maybe putting Andreas on the first of our bench or even fielding him this week versus a United team that are missing a Rafael Varane. As far as the rest of my team, quite happy to actually own Solanke and Darwin. They both have great fixtures this week. Solanke and Darwin both play at home, so that's a really, really lovely fixture to have. And I do think Darwin, of course, we've talked about the XG this season, has probably underhit his XG very similarly to Gabriel Jesus, but we still have the chances to really bank in on these players. And I do like the move of Calvert-Lewin to Jesus because Calvert-Lewin got injured and really didn't show much anyways in that performance, other than missing I would say, a key chance in the previous game. Cancelo, of course, is off of suspension, so yes, that red card, whatever you make of it, especially in contrast to what Trent did in a Tottenham game, we still get Cancelo back this week, so I'm very happy to own him. City actually have the best clean sheet odds this week, so it's going to be good signs going ahead. And so this week with Game Week 16, my defense is going to be exactly the same as it was last week, with Cancelo actually serving a suspension in the AFL Cup game. We do actually have him versus Brentford, which is going to be a fantastic fixture. Trippier and Pope, there's nothing I'd really like to do to amend them. I know some people actually have some better teams than me when it comes to not having an injury situation like a Calvert-Lewin, like a Mitrovic that some people are dealing with. And if you actually have a really solid team for Game Week 16, I'd probably actually recommend moving away from Pope this week into an Ederson or even an Alisson potentially if you have the option to do that, or a Ramsdale, right? Because these are great fixtures where we have at least 40% of a clean sheet percentage as per the gambling odds. And that could really help you out with rounding out your team for this week if you don't really see any transfers on the horizon for you. Trippier, of course, is someone that I think is essential because you're not really losing too much value in him. Yes, of course, you do expect him to maybe lose a clean sheet versus Chelsea, but on the offensive end, on bonus points and everything like that, not really worth passing up such a player. And he's been so consistent lately. I even tweeted out that I think we should even consider him as captaincy options potentially later in the season, just in the same way where we looked at Cancelo as quite a consistent captaincy option in the previous year. And obviously at various times this year, but not last week, of course. Webster is someone who I'd like to play this week. Aston Villa did actually play quite a tough and grueling game versus Man United. And I think there are chances, of course, for Brighton to keep the clean sheet, at least much higher than both Neco Williams and Schär, in my opinion. Neco Williams is playing for a team where I really just think they're giving too many chances away each game. We saw Nottingham Forest get a clean sheet versus Brighton, but that's only really something I think Brighton can manage when it comes to wasting, let's say, 2xG versus a team. On the other hand, I think this Aston Villa team have been very clinical. They actually have not been doing exceptionally well when it comes to their stats from an underlying perspective. And we saw United, of course, kind of claw back that sort of two-legged fixture with them. Aston Villa were able to score around 5 goals in the previous 2 weeks with effectively an XG of 1.5, and that's quite impressive. But I'd still like to keep Webster for now, just because, as I said, the other matchups aren't really interesting, and I don't really want to back triple Newcastle defense this week, nor do I really want to waste a transfer on that. And so just go ahead of the curve here, I've gone with the midfield with the captaincy options included, a vice captain over De Bruyne and a captaincy over Salah, and that probably lets you guys know what I have in mind with Erling Haaland. I'm not really going to go into him this week. I'm going to go for Salah and hope that the captaincy does pay off, or at least hedges itself well versus Haaland, because I still see Salah having a fantastic fixture here. Yes, of course, Southampton don't really have a playing right back for now, and that does benefit Darwin Nunez, but I think he's a good enough differential on his own. He really only has single-digit ownership. It might change, of course, to something like 12 to 13% this week. A lot of people are making that move, but I did have Darwin ahead of the curve, and I'm very happy to own him. Saka and Martinelli are still very consistent players, playing versus a Wolves team that have been giving away a lot of chances, have had some red cards, and still, as I said, lack a managerial hire from a permanent position. And I think it's a great fixture for these Arsenal players who've been selected for their World Cup national teams to hopefully send themselves off with an absolute banger and stay on the top of the table versus Wolves away from home. De Bruyne is someone who's been very consistent this season. If you actually look at his underlying stats, they're much better than previous years past. And part of that, too, is because he now has an outlet to go for it. When you look at, let's say, Haaland coming back into the game when they were one man down versus Fulham, and how easy it was for De Bruyne to find Haaland immediately when it was a really tough game for around 65, 60 minutes, where De Bruyne really didn't have any outlets to play, didn't really have anyone to feed. It's such a dynamic environment now with De Bruyne, and he now has more chances as well, which obviously helps him from an FPL perspective and hurts me a little bit as well, because I think Haaland will be beneficiary of some of the chances that he can create. But going -4 out of De Bruyne is something I don't really want to do this week, because I think even Haaland's maybe expected minute ceiling might not be that high. Potentially they might be still managing his injury in some sort of way. And I still really like, as I said, the Salah captaincy this week. Rounding out the team, I'm going to actually incorporate Jesus into the team. So that's going to be my one free transfer used this week, and hopefully send me off towards the unlimited transfers of the World Cup with a relatively strong squad that I think has a great Game Week 16 ceiling. When we look at Jesus versus Wolves, yes, of course, he's been extremely unclinical, but we know he can still provide assists. That's one of the key things with Jesus. When you actually watch him as a striker, even though he actually doesn't really score more than 1 goal per game, you'll see that in the matches where he scores 1 goal, that he still finds himself at the top of the bonus tables. And that's because he creates so many chances for the team, and the bonus system does seem to rate him a lot. When you contrast that to someone like Kane, who plays with the Tottenham team, who are a little bit more conservative at times, and doesn't allow Kane to really use the full, I would say, stretch of his abilities and his chance creation, you'll see that Kane actually often struggles to get the full bonus points in a game where he and many other players score. It's only Kane when he scores in a 1-0 game where Kane gets bonus points, whereas Jesus, even if they're able to beat teams 3-0, 4-0, and his only involvement as a goal, you'll still see him actually quite high on bonus charts, and that just shows how much of an impact he provides with Arsenal being a little bit more of a front foot team. Darwin is someone who's a fantastic matchup here for Southampton. We talked about the lack of a right back and how he might even be an interesting differentials captaincy shout. I'm not really tempted to go towards there, as I said, because the effective ownership of Darwin is incredibly low, and I would already be benefiting from that perspective. And Solanke, once again, has a fantastic matchup. Someone that we said would round off the season really well if we were able to go through the red fixtures, which included the Tottenham game, which we expected him not to play. And now that he's gone through all of that, quite happy to own Solanke versus Everton. An Everton team away from home that aren't particularly good, and obviously struggled last week out as well. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead. Let's hope for a great end towards this fantasy kind of midterm break, and then we can reconvene at the World Cup fantasy.